Hey guys, Jay Wilson from Onyx reporting here. One more follow-up video to finish out this conversation about simulation and modeling in Domo. So a couple weeks ago, like I said, Andrew Chapman and I, we did a recording, a webinar about bringing prescriptive or predictive analytics into your Domo environment. We talked about what that journey can look like for the average Domo customer. And then in my next video, which I just published, I talked about in detail how you could go about building a simulation where you answer this question of how many tickets should you oversell if you're an airline and you're trying to maximize your profit. And again, just to remind us all, that visualization ended up looking like this box plot here, where we could, play with variables like what is the cost per ticket, or what is the price per ticket, or the cost per travel voucher. We could play with those inputs and change the shape of this chart to inform what is the right number of tickets to oversell. And at the end of the day, that's the million-dollar question. How can I use Domo to not just know that, hey, 95% of the time people show up, but how can I use Domo to play with some inputs and then come to a conclusion or a prescriptive action on how many tickets I should oversell? And I told you guys that you could use simulation to answer that question. And that's what we did. But now I'm going to show you the actual tools that I used to create this. What I'm super excited to tell you is we're going to take a quick sneak peek at two beta features that are coming out in Domo in the near future, hopefully. One being Magic ETL 2.0 and the dataset views beta, which was hinted at Domopalooza, and we've all been holding our breaths since then. All right. Before I get you in looking at the tools, though, we kind of want to model what we need our data to do and look like, just as a start. Right? So in any kind of simulation exercise, you need to be able to recreate something that doesn't exist. So in my case, I started out with a whole bunch of numbers, like 1 through 200,000. And I said, okay, each number is going to represent a seat on a flight. And let's assume that each flight has an even 50 seats per flight. Cool. With those constraints in mind, how can I make this data set resemble a seat on a flight and tell me whether or not somebody showed up for their flight or not? So what we can start with is the modulo function. I don't know if you guys remember long division. For me, it's been a while, but the general idea is if I do long division and I say 1 divided by my divisor, let's say in this case I have 10 seats on a plane, 1 divided by 10 is 0, remainder 1. And that's the modulo, the remainder number. So if I pull that all the way through, I can see, okay, let's look at this. 10 divided by 10 is 1, remainder 0. And 20 divided by 10 is 2, remainder 0. Modulo just gives you the remainder. If I want to do my flight reset, or every time, how do I know I'm on the first flight, or the next flight, or the next flight? Let's define that as any time where the remainder is equal to 1. So I'll say if remainder equals 1, then return 1, else return a 0. And that's when I know that I've shifted between my first flight and my second flight and my third flight. Piece of cake, sort of. Because now I have the reset, but I need to know the flight number. And the flight number is going to be the cumulative sum of flight reset. So this will be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, plus 1 is 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, plus 1 is 3, 3, 3, 3, and so on. So that will allow me to subdivide my rows into blocks for each flight. Now, to do a cumulative sum, we just do a little bit of Excel magic, right? I make D7 an absolute cell reference so the position doesn't move. I want to add up from the dawn of time. Let's look down here. So starting from the dawn of time, I add up 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. And now I have my flight numbers. So basically what I've done is I've created a data set that will allow me to simulate what would happen if I ran a flight with 10 seats 100 times or 1,000 times. Cool, but that doesn't actually tell me did they show up for the flight or not. Right? That's the piece we're missing. And we said that 95% of the times people show up for their flight. So what if I generate a random number between 1 and 0? Okay, cool. I generated a random number using the random function in Excel. But that doesn't actually tell me if they showed up for their flight. But what I can do is I can say, if this random number is less than or equal to 0.95, then they showed up for their flight. Otherwise, they missed their flight. I'm going to copy paste these values so they stop. Sorry, let me do this again. One more. Okay. I'm going to copy. I was waiting to see a couple more zeros, but I'm going to copy paste these values so they stop moving and recalculating. Dang it. Stop it. I want to have at least 1 or 2 zeros in here, please. Okay. Copy. Paste values. All right. So here we can see this example. 0.98 is obviously greater than 0.95. So this was the low probability chance that that person missed their flight. And here, again, 0.98. This is like that 5% chance that that person missed their flight, 0.96 as well. So if I take the aggregation of the data by the flight number, then it will say, hey, on this flight, 9 people showed up for this flight. And for this flight, 9 people showed up for this flight, and so on. And this, you'll run this simulation thousands of times, and that will give you an idea of, or it should come out to, 95% of the time people make the flights. That's the whole point of this random number experiment. Cool. We're almost there. I still need to know how many seats to oversell. So what I'll do is I'll join this data set to that data set after the flights have been aggregated. So let me unhide something that I prepared for us. So here, on flight 1, let's assume that I had 10 seats, 9 people showed up. On flight 2, I had 10 seats, 9 people showed up. On flight 3, I had 10 seats, and 10 people showed up. How many tickets should I oversell? Well, I'll join this aggregated data to each of the different models that I want to model. I'll do what's called a cross apply or join on 1 equals 1 if you've seen my other tutorial videos. And I should get data that looks like this. And this is what I end up pulling into the final data set that the previous tutorial video was about. That's the journey that's the journey that the data has to go through. This is how you can template any kind of simulation in Domo using standard out-of-the-box tools. Now, I'm going to show you Magic ETL 2.0 in dataset views, but you can do this with Magic ETL 1.0. Well, except for the random part. You would actually have to do that in SQL. I'm going to show you how to do most of this in Magic ETL 1.0, no special features, but if I didn't have access to Magic ETL 2.0, I would probably do this in Redshift or MySQL, just being honest. But cool, let's get into the beta features. This is so cool, guys. All right, I'm losing my voice, I've been talking so long. Here it is. For those of you who hate using Magic ETL, the whole ETL is done in 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles. It is so cool how much you can do in this new update to the UI. So first thing, I wanted to limit my list of numbers. Like I have a dimension table that has all of the numbers between 0 and 524,000. I only wanted to run 99,000 rows in my experiment. So I apply a filter. And we're used to applying filters where we would say where number is less than or equal to a specific value, 9, and then we would have to add another rule to say number also has to be greater than or equal to. Oh, and it was such a pain, so much clicking. And I hear you guys, that's why we don't like using Magic ETL. It's because of all the clicking, but check this. I can write a formula that uses a between clause, which is huge because you can't even use a between clause in beast modes, but you can use a between clause in Magic. This is amazing. Love that. Cool. So I filter, sorry, so much excitement. I filter my data set to 100,000 rows. Then I want to calculate my flight reset. And remember, flight reset was just to say every 50 rows. In this case, it's every 50 rows, but in the Excel example, it was every 10. But I do my modulo division. And then if the modulo division is equal to 0, then return a 1, else return a 0. So I'm doing a case statement inside of my beast mode, which again is super cool because if you had to implement this in Magic ETL 1.0, Magic 1.0 doesn't support case statements. You would have to build a filter on the result of this, and then you would do your filter to break it out into 2 separate case streams, do your math, and then append it together. Huge pain in the butt. This is all in one step now. And then we do our window function. The window function UI, as far as I can tell, hasn't changed. But here I'm saying I want to do a cumulative sum, right, to get the flight number 1 or 2 or 3 onto every single row. So I take the sum of flight reset with an unbounded start and no rows into the future. Just coming back to here again, my cumulative sum, like say I'm here, I'm going to start unbounded. So I want to start at the beginning of time and add up all of the rows up to the current row. And that's called a frame in window function vernacular. Cool. You do have to define an explicit sort order when you're using the cumulative sum function, which is the number column. That's this guy here. But that's fine. So nothing changed there. And then I add a constant join column 1 equals 1, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So guys, Magic ETL 2.0 really has upped the game in terms of minimizing the number of clicks it takes to put an ETL together. And Grant, I think you and I, we talked about if only Domo had snapping. It has snapping, which means no excuses for ETLs that are like squiggly lines all over the place. Clean up your ETLs, make them legible. I love this. I should, as I say that, I have no names. That's fine. Also, the preview is wicked fast. Super fast. And we can see the results here. Very nice. So again, at the output of my Magic ETL data flow, the granularity is 1 row per seat in my experiment. So I have 100,000 rows, 1 row per seat. But I actually only have, I think, 20,000 flights. And so I want to aggregate this data before I bring it into Analyzer, into 1 row per flight per model or per what-if analysis. And that's what I was talking about over, sorry for moving the webcam all over the place. But that's what I'm talking about here. I want to aggregate the row to 1 row per flight per seats to oversell. And seats to oversell is a web form that I'm using. Now I could do this in Magic ETL, but I'm going to try to avoid as much as possible doing joins in Magic ETL. And instead, I'm going to use a fusion, or today we're going to show you the dataset views beta. Again, this was hinted at Domopalooza, so I don't think I'm sharing any secrets that nobody knows about, but it's really cool. It does have a couple quirks that are going to hopefully get ironed out, but let's take a look. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to join my raw data set to my model table, my web form. And I'm going to join on join column equals join column. And then I'm going to choose to exclude join column and add seats to oversell. Okay, so if my data set on the left is 100,000 rows, and my data set on the right is 10 rows, then I will, by doing this cross apply or this cross join, my data set goes up to 1,000,000, and bad at math, 1,000,000 rows. But I want to aggregate it to 1 row per flight number per model. Before I do that, though, I need to calculate my seats to oversell. Or sorry, I need to calculate, did they show up for their flights? I'm going to add it. Hey guys, by the way, you can do a beast mode. You can do a beast mode in Fusion or in a dataset view. So we'll call this did show. So this is going to be a case statement. When the random, when random is greater than or equal to, less than or equal to 0.95, then 1 else 0. Same close. And then I'm going to add one more column to just get total seats. And that's just going to be 1. Because the granularity of my data set is 1 row per seat on the flight. So now I can apply my group by clause, and I can say I want to have 1 row per flight per model, and then I want to take the sum of did show and the sum of total seats. And so now, for flight number 1, I'm going to model what happens if I oversell 20 seats, 15 seats, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seats. And then for flight number 2, I'll model how much money would I have made if I'd oversold 10, 15, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seats. And that's what I went into Analyzer with. And again, my whole point of this tutorial was to show you guys how you can do like what if analysis in Domo, how you can do simulation in Domo at a pretty large scale, right? It would be pretty difficult for you to come up with 200,000, 20,000. It might be hard for you to come up with 20,000 rows worth of flight information, but I can simulate it using the random function. And I know the random function will work because it's a statistical function. You know what else is super cool, though, about this dataset views? Now, this is not new to Fusions, and I know if you guys have seen my channel and been following me, you've seen me do this before. But what I really appreciate about Fusions and dataset views, and this is why I don't do joins in ETL, is if I change some of these values in the web form, in my model page, by the time I get back to the actual data set and analyze, it will already have updated. So it says it last ran a few seconds ago. Functionally, it created updated a 20,000 row view, and all of this data has been changed in the time it took me to click. So basically seconds. So your what if analysis is blazing fast. And if I had built a card off of this card, if this card was pointed at that new data set, it would update in real time, and you could see like what the change in your model looks like. Wow, we covered a lot. I started out by wanting to show you guys the technical execution for how you build a data set that supports simulation. I wanted to show you guys how you can bridge that gap between like just basic descriptive analytics, descriptive reporting, to kind of prescriptive analytics without making a huge jump or investment in like learning Python and learning statistics. It's just like we understand this stuff intuitively. And then all we were doing is showing you how you can parameterize and kind of play with, do what if analysis in Domo by just structuring your data the right way to support that kind of question asking. In any event, my name is Jay Wilson. This is what I do for fun. Well, for fun. I'm a freelance consultant, so I do get paid for this. This is kind of the work that I do. If you are a one-year customer and you're trying to do more advanced things with Domo, quicker, faster, stronger, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you guys. And yeah, good luck. Have fun. Catch you guys later.